So let's continue on. We're going to take the type tool, and for this call to action, it's just going to say try for free. All right. Can't see it because it's gray. I'm going to make it white. Let's get rid of that letter spacing. That doesn't look good here in this context. Let's increase the size. Try for free. Roughly right around there. And we'll move this right here. Now we'll take both of them. Now you should know the drill at this point. Take both. Make sure we have both selected for the layers. Right click, make component and padding. That way, if we want to change the anchor text here, we're not going to have to worry about changing the width of the button behind it because it automatically changes. Next up, let's have, sometimes when it comes to a call to action, you may have what's called a secondary call to action, where you have just a second button that doesn't stand out quite as much, but it could be a really a link or to a page or a video that somebody really wants to see. That really makes sense. So we're going to have, instead of, and by the way, I've seen people do this. They'll have two call to actions, like watch a video. Oops, let me fix that spelling. Watch a video. This is wrong. Why is it wrong? Because you don't want two call to actions that are styled exactly the same. There should always be a primary objective when it comes to your site or your client's site. What is it that, what is the target? What is the objective that you value the most? There's always going to be one that you want them to take the most. So it doesn't make sense to have a call to action or two call to actions that are styled exactly the same. It's a visual hierarchy issue again. So the one that's more important will generate the most interest of the eyeball, essentially. So we're going to make this one less important. So to do that, I'm just going to take the type tool and I'm going to put watch a video. All right, we're going to put this here. Now, if I change this to black, all right, this is definitely less important, but you know what? It's a little bit, it's competing for too much attention of the eye based on this headline right next to it. Yeah, it's smaller, but it's still competing too much. We need to separate it more. So let's make it smaller. And you know what? We don't even need to make it bold. Let's just go to regular. Now, to make it evident that it's a link that somebody can click, we can underline it by clicking the underline button here. Now, this is a lot better than what we had, right? Let's also put an icon. Now, so this is going to be the first time I introduce you to plugins in Adobe XD. If we come up here to the hamburger menu, we'll see we have plugins. Now, I already have a bunch of plugins installed. If you're new to this, you probably have none, in which case you want to go to Browse Plugins. So when we click Browse right here and we search, you could type in something like Icon, and you're going to get a bunch of different plugins like Icon Drop by Icon Scout. There's a ton that you can, choose from. If I go back here, the one that I'm going to use is Icons. No, that's not the one I'm going to use. I'm sorry, I lied. It's called Icons for Design. If you just put in the icon name, or if you just try to search for one, you're going to find a list of icons, chances are at least. I want a video. So if I just type video, you're going to get all these different icons that you can use that demonstrate video. You could use a video camera. I'm going to left click just left click it rather. And when you left click it, it'll just drop it right in for you. So now we have a nice little icon that accompanies this text right here. Now, I think we could, I also kind of want to make this a little bit less contrast. So it's like a darker gray. It's all fours here, 6 fours. And that looks pretty good right here. Now, of course, we're missing context because it's not a completed design. We need something over here. What goes over here, or what could go over here? Many different things. An illustration of some sort could go there. And that's what I'm going to do. So to demonstrate a few other features of Adobe XD, let's go ahead and create some sort of like little illustration over here. So the first thing I'm going to do is take the this tool right here, the rectangle tool, and let's go back to our layers, by the way, and let's get rid of the border, And let's make it a rounded. And maybe this is going to be illustration, like a rough skeleton UI based illustration of like a task app. All right. And that's going to allow me to show you a couple of really cool things called the repeat grid and also stacks. So let's go ahead and create like a little checkbox situation, like icon. So I'm going to take the ellipse tool. I'm going to hold Shift and Alt while left clicking and dragging. That's going to make sure that wherever I click, it's going to expand from that center point, and also using Shift, it'll allow me to make sure it's a perfect circle. So we're going to take off the annoying border that's always added, and this time let's use a different color. Maybe we're not going to use blue. We could use blue, but I see blue all over now. We can introduce a secondary color, maybe like green. That's really bright, kind of hurts my eyes, so we can just drop this over here. And we could just experiment with the shade of green. Yeah, I think right there is good. That's 1FC41F. We're going to add it to the swatches by clicking plus. And then we're going to come in here and we're going to take the pen tool. I'm going to left click like right around here, hold Shift, left click, keep on holding Shift, and then left click finally, hit escape. Now we can change the border, make it bold, and make it white so that it really contrasts well. Oops, I did not mean to do that. There we go. So now we can center it up there. All right, so now we have this little checkbox thing. Now let's go ahead and create what's called kind of like a skeleton UI. So this is kind of like emulating a list of items that are checked off. So I'm going to drag out here roughly this size. We're going to make them pill shaped. We're going to get rid of the border. And this time we're going to use like a pastel sort of color. So let's come to like purplish. Pastels will be like around here in the color selector, just to give some more color to this UI. Yeah, right there is good. I'm going to duplicate this. Control D, hold Shift, drag down. Now let's change the width of this. Come down a little bit more with our key. We'll duplicate this. Maybe we'll have a couple circles to emulate, like, I don't know, icons or something in this little fictional UI. And there we go. All right, so now, what if we wanted to have like 3 of those total? Do we sit there and recreate all 3 of them? No. By the way, this is a little bit large. I'm gonna select both, hold Shift, Alt, scale down. There we go. So we want to. It would be very dumb to recreate all of that by hand like we just did, right? So Adobe XD will give you several different ways to tackle this. So level newbie would be to recreate all of that stuff that we did and try to do it 3 times. One step up from that would be to take all those. Notice how we selected the background. We could hold Shift deselect as well. We could take these, we could hit Control D, we could duplicate it, Control D, duplicate it as well. And then we have our 3, right? Well, that's better than trying to recreate them from scratch, right? But it's still not as intelligent of what we could do. With all of them still selected, we can hit Repeat Grid. And now notice we have these little anchors, these little handles, and it changed to a dashed green. If we pull down, guess what? Look at that. And then also if we change one thing, it'll change among all the other rest of them. Look at that. Very, very cool stuff, very powerful. And we can also even take this and pull it this way and create, you know, a bunch of columns in rows that repeat whatever we started with. So that's very, very handy. You can also ungroup the grid when you're done. So now it just kind of keeps them in their own groups. But if you make a change to one of them, they will no longer change to the rest of them. So it's just something very important to remember. Now, let's say, for instance, we want to change the color of this, like this middle row, the second row, to like a greenish pastel, and maybe this one to like an orange one. Well, in order to do that, we're going to ungroup the grid. Then we're going to go ahead and when you ungroup the grid, it automatically creates groups out of whatever you replicated. So you can double click into that to select into that group. So that's very important to understand. So let's change these colors. In fact, we can hold shift and select all of them, and we can change all of them at once. And so let's change this one to like an orangish maybe. Yeah, right around there is okay. Color code for that is F9D5A5. And then we'll do the same thing real quickly here and just create another color. This one, well, I think maybe we'll use like a greenish. Yeah, that's fine right there. All right, now we're looking good. Okay, so now, let's say for instance, this was a list and we wanted to be able, maybe the client or yourself or your boss or whatever says, I want this green one on top for whatever reason. And this could be applicable to so many different use cases when it comes to lists and stuff. Well, you can go like this and then realign them like that, right? Yes, you could. But one way that even makes it easier, let's select all these. We're going to right click and make a component. Now, remember we saw this, we've used this padding option, but we haven't used the stack option yet. Let's click that. So we've now created a stack and we have these two buttons. This is a vertical stack. It will know automatically, it will try to guess based on the type of list that you have or the type of elements and how they're structured to situate it as a vertical stack or a horizontal stack. So for us now, watch what happens if I want to move this one to the top. We double click into it and watch this. They all move automatically. So you don't have to do that extra work. Very helpful to understand how to use these stacks right here. Very, very helpful. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we're gonna say that's pretty much the design. Maybe one thing we wanna change here though is we'll double click into here. Maybe this won't be green. Maybe this one will be, let's make it white. And then we'll take this element here and we'll make that one, actually, no, it's not even gonna have a check mark box. Maybe we'll give this a little bit of a border and then we'll make it kind of like a light border, like a light gray. So it's 4. Let's add this to our swatches and we can quickly just replicate that for this one. Oh wait, it doesn't have a fill. This is 4. There we go. It does have a fill, it's just white. There we go. All right, now we're good. So I kind of like that better. We could just leave it exactly like this, the whole thing. Let's get it like kind of situated in a way that makes sense right here. I want to show you another thing. If we select on most of our elements here, you're going to have the option to apply a shadow. Shadows are really cool. A lot of people get them wrong in terms of UI design, but let me just show you one thing we can do. We can increase the blur. We could take the Y down, so we could push it down real far, push it left or right. Very cool. Just try to go easy on your shadows. Like you change the opacity. A lot of people do something like this. It's just, you don't want to see that. If you're gonna use shadows, try to make them very understated, very low opacity. And this is fine. We could also have not used a shadow at all. At this point, it's kind of like a subjective preference. All right, so we're gonna say that that is our hero section. And this may be the only thing that a person sees with what's called above the fold when they look at the app, all right? We're going to create more design though, because obviously this is pretty understated, and obviously I also want to show you a lot more of what Adobe XD can do. So right here, you see this dash? This dash right here has to do with this value right here in the viewport height. So if you select this, you know, the canvas here, you'll see that we have this viewport height. If we change this value up and down, watch what happens. So if we make it like this and we hit play, that's what that's controlling. It's basically what the user sees by default without having to scroll. Now we can scroll down here by using our mouse scroll wheel. Now for me, when I'm designing initially, I like to just make this all the way, take this all the way at the very bottom, just so I don't see it. So maybe this area will list out all the different not features that are associated with our app. So there's a lot of ways to do this. Generally speaking, when you have different containers or different areas of your layout that semantically they're talking about different things, like there could be testimonials in one area, there could be contact form in another area. You want to separate them out visually, like with the background color. Not always, but we're going to do that here, and it just helps make sense based on what's happening throughout the different portions of your layout. So I'm going to take the rectangle tool, drag out just a container like this. We may end up resizing it and all that. And we're going to choose a background color for this. We could go many different colors, or not many, but we have a lot of options, and a lot of them would be subjective, I would say. Like we could go white. We could see clearly there's a big difference between this gray and this white. We could go blue. You could do that. I want to do something different though. I'm going to take the same hue of blue that we have here. So we're not going to move the hue over here, but we're going to move this and make it darker. Yeah, maybe right around there. Desaturated and dark. Still has blue in it, and it's in the same hue. So these two, they align with each other. They work well. But it's obviously, it's a high contrast from this right here. Sometimes just to be different and to break outside of the container or out of the box, so to speak, I'll put some design elements. Like for instance, we're just gonna drag out a rectangle, and maybe we'll use our primary blue color here. Maybe on this desktop version, it doesn't really serve any type of importance outside of just being an interesting design element. Another thing you'll see when it comes to like these graphic designs that you'll see in UI designs we're going to take the repeat grid. Maybe we'll have a row of 5 and then maybe 4 rows. And you'll see something like this. And it's just a sort of like there's a lot of different variations of this, or different types of elements that you can add, but they're there just for graphic design elements, just to add interest to a layout. They're not important. They're not like, they shouldn't be primary elements, but they're there just to supplement the design. All right, so we'll leave that over here. And now we're going to list out the features. And so if we bring back our grid, I think it would make a lot of sense to keep our important stuff on this second column right here, at least for this container of information that we see. So we're going to take this little checkbox. I'm going to double click a few times to get into it to select both of those layers. Control C, and then we're going to come over here and Control V. It'll put it on the same location as last time, but we're just going to take the duplicate and push it over here. And we're going to make it a lot smaller. Now, when you make it smaller, your strokes remain the same size. So you may have to scale down the size of the stroke. So now let's toggle off the grid. All right. And now we're going to start putting in some of the features. And of course, these are all fictional, so I'm just making them up. So with the type tool, unlimited tasks. Okay. And we're going to make it white so that it contrasts really well. Unlimited tasks. Now, what is the size? 21. For us, I think we're going to go a tad bit larger. So we'll bump this up to 25. All right, so our app has unlimited tasks, right? All right. Now we can list some more of these. So we're just going to take all those, repeat the grid, and then maybe we'll have this amount. Now at this point, I'm just going to take this one, SMS task reminders. Now notice how it's cutting these off. We'll fix that, don't worry. Confetti explosions upon task completions. Really exciting stuff, right? Social media announcements, whatever that means. Finally, we'll also put real time, if I can spell, collaboration. I mean, I don't even know what that means. Other awesome features. Okay. So now if we select this and we pull this all the way out, we'll see that they're overlapping. We push this just right here. We could have, you know, 2 columns if we had a lot of features, but we don't. So I'm just gonna pull this back. We're also going to structure this, like how much space do we want in, you know, in between each one of these. You don't want too close. That becomes a little bit hard to read and just doesn't look good. You don't want too much. That's a little bit too spread out. So there's a middle ground somewhere, probably right around here. And that looks pretty good. So once we have that, we can just leave this here to maintain the fact that this is a repeatable grid. You can ungroup it, and then in which case you don't have that grid features or the functionality anymore. But I'm going to leave it as a grid. Now, we have some empty space here. Like, what are we going to do about this area? Well, we could kind of take the same idea and just put it over here, right? This is where it pays to be a little bit artsy and you know, understand graphic design a little bit. So maybe we'll make a block right here. And this time, we are going to put in an image, a photograph of some sort. So that's going to lead us to another plugin called Photosplash. All right, so I'm going to enter a keyword here. So by the way, if you want to install it, go to the plugin section and go to manage plugins, then search for it, click install, and then you'll have access to it. We'll just type in using phone, find photos. And so now we can have all these photos at our disposal from which, you know, we see people using their phone. Let's just choose this one. And there we go. Now, there's something called blend modes, which we haven't talked about yet. And blend modes aren't new to Adobe XD. Blend modes have been around since Photoshop. So if we take a blend mode and we just select one, but we use our keyboard down arrow key, we can start going through them. Notice multiply, color burn, and all of them do something a little bit different than the other ones. Me, I'm going to choose, if we go all the way down, to luminosity. It doesn't really work too well with this background because it's almost seamless. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate this photograph layer, and now we have one on top of the other. We have rectangle 13 and 14. Here I was telling everybody to name their layers and I'm not doing it. We're going to take the original one, the background. And if I hide, by the way, if you hover over these, you can lock the layers and hide them. If I hide the top one, if I just toggle this on and off, or change it rather, we can see it changes. And the reason it's gray is because we're on luminosity. We have to go back to normal. We're going to choose this same exact color. Now, this is important. We're going to bring back this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those layers, pull them down to create the similar effect right here. How this was kind of extending outside of the container. This is going to come from the bottom and extend from the bottom of the container. All right. Now, notice how I said I wasn't happy. There's not a lot of separation with this particular photograph. If we double click into this, we can actually change what is shown in that area. So if we want it like that, we could do that. Now it looks like it's an actual, you know, contained image that's not seamless with this background up here. All right, and of course you could always do other different things. Like if we took that background layer, we changed the color to like this, it's gonna change this over here because this has that luminosity. And you could always change, you know, experiment with the other ones as well. I think we're just gonna stick with that one. All right, so far so good. We've really learned a ton. I mean, just learning what you've learned so far, you can get pretty far. Let's keep on designing though, because I wanted to show you some other features here that we will get to. All right, so let's take this background, Control D to duplicate it, and we'll pull it here. Now this is going to be a different area section of the landing page where we show testimonials, which is a common thing that you'll see in many landing pages. Let's take the background primary color this time. All right, so let's create what are called cards. So in UI design, Google Material made it real popular, what are called cards, which is just kind of like rectangular pieces of content, essentially. And that's what we're going to contain each of these testimonials in that you're going to see. So let's bring back a grid. And let's place a card right here. And it'll span maybe around 3. Yeah, I think that's pretty good. And then we'll also, let's go ahead and toggle that grid off. We'll also make the edges round. All right. And instead of making this white, which we could leave it white, it contrasts well, we could use the same background color with the color picker, and we could take and just make it a little bit darker. You could do this as well. All right, so let's put in a circle. So from the center, notice how what I did. I waited for these guides to show up at the right point in time. So we know it's centered vertically and horizontally because we see the vertical and horizontal alignments. And Shift and Alt, that way we can create a circle right there on the top in the middle. Now we're going to use that same plugin, Photo Splash, and we're just going to type in person. And we'll use her. You can use whatever, you don't have to use the same one. You can always, scale this and move it around when you double click into it. All right, so that's our person with our fictional, our first little card design. We're gonna give this a border as well. And let's try making it white. That works fine. By the way, when it comes to these borders, you have the ability to put it on the outside. Or we could try using the same background color, which you can't really tell it that much. We could make it thicker. You could do that, which, again, I think it's subjective. If you want to make it white, you can make it white, or just leave it the same background color, or make it this color right here. You could do that as well. In the end, I think I'm just going to leave it here. Now let's put in the actual text quote. So I'm left-clicking, dragging out, and I'm going to show you another very handy plugin in a second. So we're going to drag this down. We're going to go over here. We're going to go to Lorem Ipsum. All right. And so for Lorem Ipsum, if you don't know what that is, it's just Latin text for placeholder text. So you don't have to sit there and figure out all the ad copy while you're designing. So I'm just going to choose this, Quick Lorem Ipsum. Now the problem with this right here is we had a lot of letter height, or line height rather. So we're going to decrease that, and then I'll go back to that same plugin and do the same thing. There we go. All right, so I think it's a little bit large, this text, and it's also too close to the edges of this, so we can Alt and scroll and push that in. All right. And let's put a little quote before and after. Make sure this is all centered up pretty good. And we'll center it as well. Center align the text. And then we'll duplicate that, and then we'll put a person's name, Jane Doe. We will bold it right here. And we'll maybe, just to reinforce that visual hierarchy, we'll go ahead and take the opacity down just a tad bit. Like that. All right. So that's pretty decent. Again, I'm not sure if I want white. I think that's a little bit too much. Yeah, we'll just stick with that. All right, so now that we have that, you know, again, we could take these three or these four layers. We have the avatar, we have the description or the quote and the person's name in the background. We can right click and choose to make it a component and then stack them. It's a vertical stack. So now, you know, if for some reason I want to put this at the bottom, we could do that and all that good stuff. All right, so now we can also take repeat grid. And we're gonna repeat this pretty far out, like right here. Let's make it start maybe like right here and then repeat it out all the way that far. Now the reason I'm doing that is because when we select this, if we choose this option right here, this little icon, scroll groups, we're gonna create a horizontal scroll group because you can see the two little icons are pointing to the left and right. You can also do vertical and one that does horizontal and vertical. We'll do one of those in a second here. This one's just gonna be horizontal. When we click it, then we can kind of choose on the left and right what will be the visible portion of this scroll group. So let me show you what a scroll group actually is. So if we go back here, now if we hit play, we're gonna see the whole thing because our viewport height is real high. Again, if we change this to 1080, hit play, now we just see the 1080 portion and we can scroll down. Now watch this. Here's where the fancy stuff comes in. If we left click, oh no, it's not working. You're supposed to be able to left click that and it will show you. Let's see what's happening. Maybe I will ungroup. Is that a scroll group? I want to make sure this is working correctly. I thought I chose a scroll group. There we go. Now we hit play. It's gonna work this time, trust me. Now look at that. So now we can actually create a carousel, so to speak, where we define what is initially visible and then anything that extends outside, we'll be able to left click and drag and sort through all of them. Very, very cool stuff.